They told him he was digging his own grave, that the toxins would kill him before the first seed sprouted, that no human being had ever turned poison into paradise. They were wrong. This is the story of Marcus Chen, the man who built a farm on a landfill, and how the EPA showed up in full hazmat suits ready to destroy his life, only for the United Nations to come knocking on his door 6 years later. Some stories are hard to believe. This one is impossible to forget. Marcus Chen was not born with dirt under his fingernails. He was born into comfort in the suburbs of Chicago, the only child of a schoolteacher and an insurance salesman. He grew up with every advantage: good schools, safe neighborhoods, a college fund that paid for his degree in finance from Northwestern. By 28, he was a senior analyst at one of the most powerful investment firms in the city. He wore $1,000 suits. He ate at restaurants where the wine cost more than most people's rent. He had a corner office on the 42nd floor with a view of Lake Michigan that made visitors gasp. He had a wife named Elena who was finishing her PhD in sociology. They had a condo in Lincoln Park with hardwood floors and a balcony where they drank coffee on Sunday mornings and planned their future. They talked about children. They talked about a house in the suburbs. They talked about growing old together. Then came September of 2008. Marcus remembers the exact moment. It was a Tuesday afternoon. He was on the phone with a client when he saw his colleague, a man named Greg who had worked at the firm for 20 years, walk past his office with a cardboard box. Greg did not make eye contact. Greg's face was gray. By Thursday, half the trading floor was empty. By Friday, Marcus was called into a conference room with a lawyer and a woman from Human Resources who would not look at him. They used words like restructuring and market correction. They handed him a severance check that was smaller than his last bonus. They shook his hand and wished him luck. He did not cry in the elevator. He waited until he was in his car in the parking garage, and then he screamed until his throat bled. He told himself it was temporary. He had credentials, he had experience, he had savings. But the savings went fast. Elena tried to be strong. She took extra hours at the university library. She sold her textbooks. She stopped getting her hair cut. But the condo payment was $4,000 a month, and the severance was gone in 6 weeks. The credit cards maxed out. The car was repossessed. The electricity was cut off on a Friday in November, and they spent the weekend in the dark with blankets over the windows, huddled together on the couch, not speaking. Elena left on a Monday morning. She packed a single suitcase. She said she loved him, but she could not watch him disappear. She said she needed to finish her degree, and she could not do it from a dark apartment with no heat. She kissed his forehead. She walked out the door. He stood at the window and watched her get into a taxi and never come back. That was the day Marcus stopped being a person and started being a ghost. The eviction notice came 2 weeks later. He packed what he could fit into a duffel bag and a backpack. He walked out of the only home he had known for 6 years and stood on the sidewalk with snow falling and no idea where to go. He spent the first night in a 24-hour diner, nursing a cup of coffee until the manager asked him to leave. He spent the second night in an emergency room waiting area, pretending to have chest pain. He spent the third night in his car, a 2003 Honda Civic he had bought with the last of his cash, parked behind a Walmart, shivering under a coat that was not thick enough. For 2 years, Marcus Chen existed. He did not live. He worked day labor when he could find it. He unloaded trucks at a loading dock for $11 an hour. He washed dishes in a diner where the owner paid him under the table and sometimes shorted his hours. He ate 1 meal a day, usually whatever the restaurant threw away. He learned which grocery stores threw out bread after 8. He learned which churches gave out sandwiches on Thursdays. He learned that pride is the first thing you lose when you are hungry, and dignity is the second. He slept in his car for 8 months, through the winter, through ice storms where he woke up with frost on the inside of the windshield, through nights so cold he thought his fingers might break off. He learned to park near hospitals because the security guards were kinder. He learned to keep his driver's seat reclined so no one could see him. He learned to use the bathroom at gas stations and wash his face in the sink and pretend he was just passing through. In the summer of 2010, something broke in him. Or maybe something finally woke up. He was standing in line at a food pantry, holding a numbered ticket, staring at his shoes, when he realized he could not remember the last time he had looked another human being in the eye. He was 32 years old and he had become invisible. He had become a statistic. He had become everything he once feared. He walked out of that line. He got in his car. He drove. He did not know where he was going. He just drove south, away from the city, away from the lake, away from every memory of who he used to be. He drove until the city turned into suburbs, and the suburbs turned into farmland, and the farmland turned into nothing. He drove until his gaslight had been on for 40 miles and his stomach was eating itself, and his eyes were so heavy he could barely see the road. That was when he saw the sign. It was hand-painted on a piece of plywood, leaning against a fence post on a dirt road that looked like it had not been maintained in a decade. The paint was faded, the wood was warped, but the words were clear: land for sale, $1. No catch. Marcus stopped the car. He sat there for 10 minutes, staring at that sign, waiting for the punchline. He got out. His legs were stiff from driving. His back ached. He walked to the fence and looked beyond it, and what he saw made his breath stop. It was a landfill, not a working one, a dead one, a graveyard of garbage. 5 acres of rusted metal, broken appliances, plastic bags hanging from trees like dead fruit, and mountains of rotting waste that had been compacted by time and rain into something that looked almost like soil. The smell hit him from 50 feet away, a sweet, chemical, rotting smell that made his eyes water. Flies buzzed in clouds. A crow sat on a broken refrigerator and watched him with black, empty eyes. Marcus stood there for an hour. He walked the perimeter. He saw a couch with the springs exposed. He saw a pile of tires that had melted into each other. He saw medical waste. He saw paint cans. He saw the corpse of a television from 1982. He saw a child's bicycle, rusted with no wheels. He saw everything that civilization throws away when it is done with it, and he felt something he had not felt in 2 years. He felt a spark, not hope, not yet, but curiosity, a strange, irrational, impossible curiosity. He drove into the nearest town. It was called Millbrook, population 800. He found the county clerk's office in a building that looked like it had been a bank in 1950. The clerk was a woman named Doris who had gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. She looked at him like he was either a saint or a lunatic. She pulled the file. The land had been a county landfill from 1975 to 1995. It had been closed after the EPA found groundwater contamination. The county had tried to sell it for 20 years. No one wanted it. The soil was classified as hazardous. The groundwater was undrinkable. The deed came with a waiver that said the buyer accepted all environmental liability and could never sue the county. Doris asked him if he understood what he was buying. He said he did not. She asked him if he had a plan. He said he was still figuring that out. She asked him why he wanted it. He looked at her for a long time, and then he said the truest thing he had ever said, because nobody else does. He signed the papers with a pen Doris lent him. He paid the dollar with 87 cents in change and the rest in pennies he had been collecting in a coffee can in his car. Doris gave him the deed and a handshake and wished him luck. She said she would pray for him. He did not tell her he had stopped believing in prayers. He drove back to the landfill. He parked his car at the edge. He sat on the hood and watched the sun set over 5 acres of poison and waste and broken dreams. He had no plan. He had no money, he had no skills. He had a shovel he had bought at a garage sale for $3 and a tent he had found in a dumpster behind a sporting goods store. He had a flashlight with dying batteries. He had a notebook with water-damaged pages. He had himself. That night he pitched his tent on the only patch of ground that did not smell like death. He lay on his back, listening to the sounds of the landfill, the rustling of plastic, the dripping of something toxic, the distant howl of a coyote, the wind moving through broken glass like a flute. He did not sleep. He stared at the roof of his tent and thought about Elena. He thought about his corner office. He thought about the coffee on the balcony. He thought about how far a man could fall and still be alive. At 4 in the morning, it started to rain. The rain was acidic. It burned his skin when it touched him. He pulled his sleeping bag over his head and waited for the sun. The first year was war. Marcus woke up every morning before dawn. He did not set an alarm. His body woke him up because his body was in survival mode. He had no coffee. He had no breakfast. He had water from a creek a mile away that he boiled over a fire made from broken pallets. He would drink the hot water and eat a can of beans, cold, with his fingers, and then he would pick up his shovel and go to work. He worked 14 hours a day, sometimes 16. Sometimes until his hands shook so badly he could not hold the shovel anymore, and he collapsed on the ground and stared at the sky until the stars came out. He cleared trash, not a little, not some. He cleared tons of it. He dragged refrigerators and stoves and washing machines to the edge of the property. He pulled up carpets that had fused with the earth. He broke down wooden pallets with a hammer he had found in the trash. He filled black garbage bags with plastic and glass and metal and dragged them to piles that grew into mountains. His hands were constantly bleeding. His back was a map of pain. His shoulders had blisters that turned into calluses that turned into scars, but the physical pain was not the worst part. The worst part was what he found. He found a box of photographs, waterlogged, the faces dissolved into brown smears. A family that had thrown away their memories. He found a wedding dress, yellowed, torn, wrapped around a broken chair. He found children's toys, so many toys. A teddy bear with one eye. A doll with no hair, a tricycle with rusted chains. He found a diary, the pages stuck together, the ink running, the words of a stranger's heart dissolving into mud. He found a human tooth. He found a medical bag with needles still inside. He found a container of something that made him vomit when he opened it. He found the evidence of everything people discard when they are done with it. The broken, the unwanted, the forgotten. And every night he wrote in his notebook, not about the trash, about the soil underneath, because as he dug, he noticed something. Under the first layer of garbage, there was earth, dead earth, gray earth, earth that smelled like chemicals, but earth, real earth. And Marcus, who had spent 2 years feeling like he was garbage himself, began to wonder if something dead could be brought back to life. He started reading. He did not have money for books, so he read whatever he could find. He found a discarded library book in the trash about organic gardening. He found a manual on soil science at a thrift store for 50 cents. He read them by flashlight in his tent, hunched over, his breath visible in the cold, his fingers numb, his eyes burning. He learned about nitrogen. He learned about phosphorus. He learned about pH levels. He learned that soil is not dirt. Soil is a living thing, a universe of bacteria and fungi and organisms that work together to create life. And then he found the word that changed everything, phytoremediation. It was in an old scientific journal he found in a recycling bin behind the community college in Millbrook. The article was about how certain plants could absorb heavy metals from contaminated soil, sunflowers, Indian mustard, willow trees. They did not just grow in bad soil, they cleaned it. They pulled the poison into their roots and stored it in their stems and leaves. They were nature's detoxifiers. Marcus read that article until the flashlight died. Then he lay in the dark, his heart pounding, and he understood that he had not bought a landfill. He had bought a patient, a sick patient that needed a doctor. But plants were not the only medicine. That same week, he found another article. This one was about a man named Paul Stamets, a mycologist, a mushroom scientist. Stamets had discovered that oyster mushrooms could break down hydrocarbons, diesel, oil, pesticides. The mushrooms released enzymes that ate the poison and turned it into harmless compounds. Stamets had used mushrooms to clean up oil spills. He had used mushrooms to restore toxic soil. He had used mushrooms to do what the EPA said was impossible. Marcus sat in his tent that night with a candle made from melted crayons he had found in the trash, and he wrote a plan. It was not a good plan. It was not a detailed plan. It was the plan of a desperate man who had nothing left to lose. But it was a plan. He would use mushrooms to break down the chemicals. He would use sunflowers to pull out the metals. He would use compost to rebuild the soil, and if it worked, if the impossible happened, he would grow food on the most poisoned ground in the county. The neighbors thought he was insane, and they were not quiet about it. The landfill was on the edge of Millbrook, and the people of Millbrook drove past it every day. At first, they did not notice him. He was just another homeless man living in the trash. But as the weeks passed, they saw him working. They saw him dragging garbage. They saw him planting things. They saw him talking to his plants. And they started to talk. They called him the trash man. They called him the landfill lunatic. They called him the idiot who bought poison. Teenagers drove past and threw beer bottles at his tent. One morning he woke up to find his shovel missing and his food supply scattered. Another morning, someone had spray-painted crazy on the side of his car. The county received complaints, anonymous calls. There is a man living on the hazardous waste site. He is disturbing the environment. He is a danger to public health. Marcus heard them. He heard everything, the laughter, the mockery, the threats. But he did not stop, because for the first time in 2 years he had a reason to wake up. He had a purpose, he had a war to fight, and the enemy was not the neighbors. The enemy was the poison, and the poison was winning. Winter came early that year. The temperature dropped to 10 below zero. The creek froze. Marcus could not make a fire because everything was wet. He wrapped himself in every piece of clothing he owned and huddled in his sleeping bag, shaking so hard he thought his bones would crack. He got sick. A cough that started in his chest and turned into something that sounded like broken glass. He had no medicine. He had no doctor. He had a bottle of expired cough syrup he found in the trash, and he drank it until it was gone. He thought he was going to die that winter. He lay in his tent, feverish, hallucinating, and he saw Elena's face. She was not angry. She was sad. She said his name. He reached for her and she disappeared. He woke up with tears frozen on his face, but he did not die. The winter broke, the snow melted, the mud came, and Marcus got up, weaker than before, thinner than before, but alive. And he went back to work. By the spring of 2011, Marcus had cleared 1 acre, 1 acre out of 5. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. But standing on that cleared ground, looking at the gray, chemical-laced soil, he felt something he had not felt since he was a child. He felt hope. He spent his last $200 on mushroom spawn. He ordered it from a supplier in Oregon who thought he was insane when he explained what he was doing. The spawn arrived in a cardboard box, wrapped in plastic, looking like nothing, just white threads in sawdust. Mycelium, the root system of mushrooms. Invisible life waiting to awaken. Marcus built a shelter from scrap wood and tarps. He called it the lab. It was not a lab. It was a shed with no walls, no heat, and a dirt floor, but it was his. He mixed the mushroom spawn with contaminated soil. He put the mixture into 500 plastic bags he had collected from the landfill. He poked holes in the bags for air. He hung them from the ceiling of his shed. He watered them with creek water. He checked them every 2 hours. He talked to them. He sang to them. He begged them to grow. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. The bags sat there, silent, dead, mocking him. Marcus began to panic. He had spent his last money. He had no food for the next month. He had placed everything on this one bet, and the bet was failing. He sat in his shed at night, staring at the bags, and he thought about giving up. He thought about walking into town and asking for help. He thought about checking himself into a shelter and admitting that the trash man was exactly what everyone said he was: a lunatic, a failure, a waste of space. On day 23, he walked into the shed at dawn, and he stopped. There was a white pinprick on one of the bags, then another, like stars appearing in a black sky. Marcus dropped to his knees. He touched the white dots with his finger. They were firm. They were alive. They were mushrooms. Within a week, the shed was a cathedral of white. Oyster mushrooms erupted from every bag. They grew in clusters. They grew in cascades. They grew with a speed that seemed supernatural. Marcus wept. He wept until his throat was raw. He wept for the 2 years of hell. He wept for Elena. He wept for the man he used to be. He wept because something he had planted in poison had decided to live. He harvested the mushrooms carefully. He did not eat them. He was not stupid. He sent samples to a lab in Chicago, paying for the testing with money he made from selling scrap metal he had collected from the landfill. He waited 3 weeks for the results. 3 weeks of terror. 3 weeks of staring at the phone in the library where he used the free internet. The email came on a Tuesday. The mushrooms were clean, no heavy metals, no hydrocarbons. The toxins had been broken down by the mycelium. The impossible had happened. Marcus walked back to his landfill that day with the printout in his hand, and he stood on the edge of his one cleared acre, and he screamed at the sky. Not in anger, in victory, in defiance. In the voice of a man who had been told he was garbage and had just proven that even garbage can grow life, but mushrooms were just the beginning. Because Marcus had a bigger plan. A plan so crazy that even he did not fully believe it would work. Sunflowers, not for beauty, not for oil, but for war. Sunflowers are hyperaccumulators. They pull lead, arsenic, and cadmium from soil and store it in their stems and leaves. They are nature's vacuum cleaners. They are the only thing on earth that can drink poison and turn it into gold. Marcus planted 10,000 sunflower seeds. He did not have a tractor. He did not have a planter. He had a stick in his hands and a back that screamed every time he bent down. He planted them one by one, row by row, inch by inch. He planted them in the soil that the EPA said was dead. He planted them in the earth that the county said was toxic. He planted them in the ground that everyone had abandoned. The neighbors laughed. They drove past and honked their horns and pointed at the crazy man planting flowers in the dump. They took pictures with their phones. They posted them online. The trash man is growing a garden in the garbage. Look at this idiot. Look at this waste of life. Marcus did not look up. He kept planting, seed after seed, day after day, until his fingers were stained black and his knees were bruised purple and his back was a single continuous scream of pain. And then he waited. For 2 weeks, nothing. The soil was too damaged. The seeds were too small. The sun was too weak. Marcus watered them every morning. He talked to them. He told them about the mushrooms. He told them about the winter. He told them about the man who had lost everything and was trying to grow it back. On day 16, the first sprout appeared. A thin green thread, no bigger than a hair, pushing through the gray soil. Marcus saw it and fell to his knees. He did not touch it. He was afraid he would break it. He just stared at it, tears running down his face, and whispered thank you. By day 30, there were 100 sprouts. By day 60, 1,000. By day 90, the 1 acre was a sea of green. By day 120, the sunflowers were 3 feet tall. By day 150, they were 6 feet. By day 180, they were 8 feet tall, their faces turned to the sun, their roots diving deep into the contaminated earth, pulling poison up into their golden stems. And then something miraculous happened. The bees came back. Marcus was sitting by his tent one morning, eating a can of beans, when he heard it, a buzzing, faint at first, then louder, then everywhere. He stood up. He looked at the sunflower field, and he saw them. A single bee, then 2, then 10, then 100, then 1,000. A swarm of life descending on his dead land like a blessing. After 15 years of silence, the landfill buzzed with life. Butterflies arrived, birds, a fox, a family of rabbits. Marcus had not just grown flowers. He had created an ecosystem. He had built life on top of death. He had turned a graveyard into a garden, but nature was not the only thing watching. July 14, 2013. The EPA arrived with 6 white SUVs, 12 agents, and full hazmat gear. They came at dawn. They came with cameras. They came with clipboards. They came with the power to destroy everything Marcus had built. The lead agent was Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She was 52 years old. She had spent 20 years shutting down illegal dumps. She had seen every kind of environmental crime. She had prosecuted oil companies. She had closed factories. She had sent people to prison for contaminating groundwater. She was tough, she was thorough, she was feared, and she had never seen anything like Marcus Chen. Dr. Mitchell walked through the sunflower field in her hazmat suit, her respirator hissing with every breath, her eyes hidden behind goggles. She looked at the mushrooms, she looked at the compost piles. She looked at the man in torn clothes with dirt under his fingernails and fire in his eyes. She ordered immediate soil tests, groundwater analysis, air quality monitoring. She took samples from 10 different locations. She told Marcus he had 48 hours to cease all operations or face federal prosecution. She said the words hazardous waste and illegal dumping and criminal liability. She said them with the full weight of the United States government behind her. Marcus did not argue. He did not fight. He handed her his notebook. He showed her his lab results. He explained the mushrooms. He explained the sunflowers. He explained the phytoremediation and the mycoremediation and the 3 years of work. He spoke for 2 hours. Dr. Mitchell listened. She did not interrupt. She took notes. She asked questions. And when he was done, she looked at him for a long time, and then she said something that made Marcus's heart stop. "Mr. Chen, if you are wrong about any of this, I will destroy you." She left. The SUVs drove away. Marcus stood in his sunflower field, surrounded by bees, holding a letter from the federal government, and he waited. He did not sleep that night. He sat by his sunflowers, watching the stars, waiting for the results that would either validate his life work or destroy it forever. He thought about the winter. He thought about the mushrooms. He thought about Elena. He thought about how far he had come and how close he was to losing everything again. The results came back at 3:47 a.m. Dr. Mitchell was still at the lab. She had not gone home. She had expected contamination levels 10 times the legal limit. She had prepared the shutdown paperwork. She had drafted the press release. She had everything ready to end Marcus Chen's experiment forever. But the numbers did not make sense. Lead levels were down 40%. Arsenic was down 35%. Cadmium was down 28%. The groundwater, while still not drinkable, was improving. The soil pH was normalizing. In just 18 months, Marcus had done what million-dollar remediation projects could not achieve in 5 years. He had not just stopped the poison, he had reversed it. Dr. Mitchell sat in that lab, staring at the numbers, and she felt something she had not felt in 20 years. She felt awe. She felt humbled. She felt like she had just witnessed something impossible. She drove back to the landfill that same morning. No hazmat suit, no respirator. Just her, in civilian clothes, walking through Marcus's sunflower field in the dawn light, her hand brushing against the golden faces, her eyes wet with tears she could not explain. She stayed for 6 hours. She took more soil samples. She took water samples. She photographed every inch of the operation. She asked Marcus to teach her. She asked him to explain the mycelium. She asked him about the compost ratios. She asked him about the pH levels. She asked him how a man with no formal training had outsmarted the entire environmental industry. And before she left, she said something Marcus would never forget. "Mr. Chen, I have spent my entire career fighting pollution. I have written regulations. I have prosecuted violators. I have shut down dumps. I have done everything the system allows me to do, and I have never met someone who outsmarted it. You did not fight the poison, you fed it to flowers. That is not just farming, that is genius." Marcus stood there, tears in his eyes, not of sadness but of vindication, of 3 years of hell finally meaning something, of every neighbor who laughed, every agent who threatened, every voice that said he was crazy, finally being silenced by science. Dr. Mitchell published her findings in the Journal of Environmental Science. The paper went viral in scientific circles. Spontaneous bioremediation, a case study in unconventional land reclamation. It was downloaded 50,000 times in the first week. It was cited by researchers in 17 countries. It changed the conversation about toxic waste cleanup. Universities sent students, environmental groups sent volunteers. What started as one man's madness became a movement. People came from California, they came from New York, they came from Germany and Japan and Brazil. They wanted to see the landfill farm. They wanted to meet the trash man. They wanted to learn the method. By 2015, Marcus had expanded to 12 acres. He had cleared more land. He had built a greenhouse from salvaged windows. He was growing tomatoes, peppers, squash, lettuce, carrots, onions, all in soil that had been classified as hazardous waste. His produce was tested by independent labs. It was cleaner than organic grocery store vegetables. It was sold at farmers markets. It was served in restaurants. People paid premium prices for food grown on poisoned ground because they knew the story. They knew the miracle. But Marcus was not done, because the biggest surprise was still coming. November 3rd, 2016. A black sedan pulled up to the landfill. It was not a government vehicle. It was not a university van. It was a diplomatic car with tinted windows and a small flag on the hood that most people would not recognize. Out stepped a man named Jean-Pierre Moreau. He was 60 years old. He wore a suit that cost more than Marcus had made in the last 3 years combined. He spoke with a French accent. He worked for the United Nations Environment Program. He had flown 4,000 miles from Nairobi, Kenya. He had not called ahead. He had not sent an email. He had come personally. Because what Marcus had done was not just farming. It was a solution to one of humanity's biggest problems. Mr. Moreau walked through the farm with Marcus. He touched the soil. He smelled the tomatoes. He watched the bees. He sat in the greenhouse and listened to Marcus explain the process. He asked questions for 3 hours. He took notes in a leather-bound journal. He was quiet, respectful, and deeply moved. Then he explained why he had come. The developing world was full of poisoned land. Bangladesh, Nigeria, India, Indonesia, places where factories had dumped chemicals for decades and left the soil dead. Places where communities had no money for expensive cleanup. Places where people were starving on ground that could not grow grass. The UN had spent billions on remediation projects that took years and failed. They needed a solution that was cheap, that was fast, that used local resources, that anyone could replicate. Marcus had created that solution. With mushrooms, with sunflowers, with compost. With nothing but patience and knowledge and refusal to quit, Mr. Moreau asked Marcus to come to Nairobi. He asked him to train UN engineers. He asked him to write a manual. He asked him to speak at the World Environmental Summit. He offered him a salary. He offered him a title. He offered him a platform. Marcus thought about it for 1 day. Then he said no to the salary. He said no to the title. He said no to the platform. He said he would help. He would teach, he would share everything, but he would not leave his farm, and he would not charge for his knowledge. He published everything online, for free. He wrote a 200-page manual. He filmed videos. He answered every email. He talked to every student. He gave away his secrets because they were never his secrets to begin with. "This is not my invention," he said. "Nature did the work. I just paid attention." By 2018, Marcus Chen's landfill method was being used in 23 countries. In Bangladesh, it was used to clean rice paddies poisoned by textile dyes. In Nigeria, it was used to restore farmland destroyed by oil spills. In India, it was used to turn industrial waste sites into community gardens. In Kenya, it was used to feed refugee camps. In Haiti, it was used to rebuild after the earthquake. The method was simple, it was cheap, it was effective. And it had been invented by a homeless man with a $3 shovel and a notebook from a dumpster. Marcus had gone from sleeping in his car to changing the world. He had gone from being invisible to being undeniable. He had gone from garbage to grace. Today, Marcus Chen's landfill is a 50-acre research and education center. There are greenhouses, there are classrooms. There are dormitories for students who come from around the world to learn the method. Over 10,000 people visit every year. Scientists, farmers, students, dreamers, all coming to see what one person can do when they refuse to accept impossible. Marcus still lives in a small cabin on the property. He built it himself from reclaimed wood and salvaged windows. It has a wood stove. It has a desk. It has a bed. It has a porch that looks out over the sunflower field. He still wakes up at 5 a.m. He still checks his mushrooms. He still walks his land every morning, talking to his plants, listening to the bees, feeling the soil between his fingers. But now, when he walks through his sunflowers, he is not alone. He is surrounded by students, by volunteers, by children from the local school who come to learn where food comes from, by researchers who come to study the soil, by farmers who come to learn how to heal their own land, by dreamers who come to see that the only difference between a graveyard and a garden is the willingness to plant a seed. Dr. Mitchell retired in 2019. She visits every summer. She and Marcus sit on the porch, drink lemonade, and watch the sun set over what used to be a mountain of trash. She tells him about her grandchildren. He tells her about the latest batch of students. They do not talk much about the old days. They do not need to. They were there. They know. She still has the first soil test results, framed, hanging in her living room next to a photograph of her grandchildren, the numbers that did not make sense, the numbers that changed everything, the numbers that proved one man can outsmart an entire system if he is stubborn enough, brave enough, and crazy enough to try. People ask Marcus all the time how he knew it would work. He tells them the truth. He did not. He had no idea. He was terrified every single day. Every morning he woke up afraid that the mushrooms would die. Every night he went to sleep afraid that the sunflowers would fail. Every season he waited for the poison to win. He was not confident. He was not certain. He was not special. But he knew one thing. The only thing worse than failing is never trying. The only thing worse than a landfill is a mind full of limits. The only thing worse than being told you are garbage is believing it. They told him he was digging his own grave. Maybe he was, but he decided to plant something in it first. He decided to grow sunflowers on his grave. He decided to make the poison beautiful. He decided to prove that the ground everyone walks away from is exactly where the miracle happens. Marcus Chen's method has been used to remediate over 2,000 contaminated sites worldwide. It has fed over 100,000 people. It has trained over 5,000 farmers. It has turned dead earth into living soil on 6 continents. He still lives on $1,200 a month. He says he is already rich enough. He says wealth is not what you have in the bank. It is what you grow in the ground. It is what you leave behind. It is the bees that come back. It is the soil that heals. It is the student who learns the method and takes it home and feeds their village. That is wealth. That is legacy. That is enough. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with the person who thinks they are too far gone. Share it with the person who believes their mistakes are permanent. Share it with the person who has been told they are garbage. Tell them about Marcus. Tell them about the mushrooms. Tell them about the sunflowers. Tell them that poison can be food, that waste can be wealth, that graves can be gardens. And remember, the most fertile soil is often found in the places everyone else abandoned. The most beautiful flowers grow from the darkest earth, and the most impossible dreams belong to the people who refuse to wake up. Thank you.